Okay, so the next part is part 2, and what we need to do is create a car faculty class, put your name, student number on it, and put a main method on it. Effectively, the part 2 here is saying, okay, let's show off that you can actually go out and create these objects, and when you create the objects, you create it with the test data you've been given here, and then there's a few search things, and just basically prove that you've gotten the thing up and going right. So from the previous, just the end of the video there, what I have done is I've created the Formula 1, the family car, family saloon, and the rally car. They're all variations on a theme. And I have the car faculty class here, and I've got a main method inside it. So things to point out, this is using the constructor with arguments for each one of them, and it's faithful to the test data that you are, in this case, I've been given. Okay, so here's all the information. We're expecting the display all method to show all this stuff here. And what I need to do is go off and make sure that I create all these things based on this test data. Don't create your own stuff. If you've been given test data, it's a luxury. Go ahead and use it. Don't go off and do other things with it. Okay, so we need to go out and see what this display all method is going to look like. Okay, so what I've done here, that's family saloon, that's for F1 Ferrari, that's the F1 McLaren, rally car and saloon. Now again, I'm using the constructor with arguments. That's a better way rather than do it all in one line. And then it asks you, if you look back at this, it asks you to pop all these things into an array and then use the display all method for each one of the objects to allow you to get the output to look like that. So let's go off and do that. So if I need to put all of this stuff into an array, what I need to do is go off and create an array of type car. Call it cars plural because that's more readable in terms of the object reference. And then what we're going to do is just pop all these things in here. So I've got this guy, and I've got F1, I think it is there. I've got F12, and these are just the object references. R1's a rally car, and family saloon 2. Okay, so that's been popped into there. In order for me to then print the things out, better mechanism, because you'll see with this main method it's going to get pretty big and bulky. There's going to be lots of stuff with it. So good general principle in terms of going forward with your code is that if you've got a bit of functionality, that sounds very much like a method. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a method here which is public, static and void, because it's really just a test method within this class. I'm going to call it show all car details, something like that. And what it's going to do is take an array of type car, and it's going to output all the values there. Okay, so again, good principles. Just because it's a test class doesn't mean that you shouldn't be coding with good principles. Make sure you put your comments and things in there. And this is going to output, and use an enhanced for loop, each car within cars class, cars object array, and it's going to print out everything, the screen basically. So C dot display all will refer to the display all method of each one of these car objects, and when it comes out the screen here, we should see all cars coming out, and then family saloon and a wee bit of a space. So again, I'm not massively worried about the formatting in terms of the output for the video here, but I would try and keep it exactly right in terms of the running of the assessment. So show all car details, that's the car is going to be passed into it. Comment it, so why not comment your code as you go along. So create creating array of cars, and then here we're going to say something along the lines of showing all car details to screen. Okay, and that's our method call for it. And let's go off and give it a go and see what it does, and that should put out pretty much what we're looking for here. Okay, there might be a wee few formatting things in here. Note that one that's been picked up there, horsepower, has been set as -999 because the data that you were asked to use there for the Maranello is 2330. Okay, so just be careful of that one. You should see that coming out like that. I'll actually update that's a good test for you there. I'll update that in terms of assessment, so there's no confusion with that in terms of what you're expected to output there. But again, it's useful for you to see in terms of ensuring that the validation is working. So that's showing all the details. Principles coming out there. Create a method. Okay, create a method, stick it into an array, pass the array into the method, and that's a better mechanism rather than having an enhanced for loop stuck in the middle of this main method here, or even a for loop using dot length in terms of the array. That's a better mechanism to do so there. Okay, so the next one then I'll show you is we need to do a few things here in terms of add additional functionality to the car factory class to search the car objects. So first one, we'll find the car with the least horsepower. So we'll do that one. The rest of them are a variation on a theme. I'll let you have a play about with those. So in terms of video, we'll do this one. So find the car with the least horsepower. Output only the model of the car. So again, you need to do what it asks you to do. So let's go back. And what we want to do is, again, we've got an array. So it's the same sort of principle. It's going to be public. It's going to be static. It's going to be void. And it's going to be output least, say HP, okay, least horsepower. It's going to take our array again of cars and we'll pass that in there. Okay, so what we would like to do is go through each one of these things then, and we want to go through each one of these and figure out which one is the least horsepower. So the best way of doing that is saying, well, look, okay, let me consider. This is basically like a min and max that you've done a few times before in terms of what's the biggest of two numbers or what's the biggest of a series of numbers. So why don't we set the very first min value that we care about to the first element in the array. So the very first car, we will consider it to have got the least horsepower initially, which would be true because that's the first one that we're going to look at. So that's our min value, and that allows us to do a comparison. We also need to keep the name of the car or the model of the car which has the least horsepower. And what we need to do then is keep that every time we find a new one. And initially what we'll do is we'll set it to the initial value. So remember that when we use the array and then the square index and the value inside it, that refers to the first car, which in this case would be this one, and then it allows you to get whatever properties and set over whatever properties you want. In this case, I want to set and get the model rather than set the model. So at this point in time, we've got something that we can use for reference, and we've something we can use for reference for comparison between minimum values there. So in here, okay, let's go off, and we're going to use a for loop again. It doesn't really matter in this case. We're using the enhanced for loop or counter control for loop. It makes no difference. We're not actually going to change the contents of the array. We're just going to go through it. So either one makes no difference in terms of the assessment, in terms of marking. But we are going to go through each one of these. What we want to do is say if the current, and in the first case it's going to be the first one that we're looking at, so it'll be no change. But from the first second forwards onwards, in terms of the array objects, there will be changes or potentially changes. So what we're going to say is if the horsepower of the object is less than the current minimum value, then we've found a new minimum value, and we want to keep a record of that. First thing we want to do is say, well, look, we've got a new minimum value, so let's keep that value, which is what we're doing there. But remember, the output from this method is this. It's going to be the one with the least, the model with the least value. So what we need to do is capture that also. As soon as we go in and say we've got a new one, we want to capture its name. Okay, so there we go. Once we do that, then we can just let the loop run away. So every time it's going to go in, it's going to check what the current value is against what's the value that we're looking at, and say, well, if it's smaller, then update our minimum horsepower and also update the reference to the car model. Okay, so when we do that and we go system.out that print line at the end, and we'll say min HP, what it's going to do is come back and give us the car with the least horsepower. Okay, the data that I'm using here, because we used for the Maranello, we put in that value there. So just on screen here, I'm going to change this so that we'll change it to that. Okay, so that'll make it a wee bit easier. So if we look at our data here, if we're doing this right, we should go the whole way through this array, and the one with the least horsepower should be the Subaru Legacy, but it's the Legacy as the model, so that's the bit we should see coming out the screen. So if I give that a run, we should see, if we call the method, down here. So in the main method again, and we're looking for least horsepower. So remember the name of the method, out least horsepower. Not a very good name, is it? Out least horsepower, pass in the same array and run it. It's saying the minimum HP horsepower is the legacy, and that's the model that we were looking for there. Again, I might be inclined to tidy that up a wee bit and put a wee bit of text around it just to make it a wee bit clearer on the output. So that's the other ones. The other questions here, or the other parts here, are variations on a theme. So output all details of the car with Subaru. Again, find a method that would allow you to do that, or write a method that would allow you to do that, and output the average horsepower. Again, you've done averages many times. Go through the array of objects, keep a record of the total, divide it by the number of objects inside the array, and note now when it did ask you to display it to 2 decimal places, which would be a system.f. Okay, dokes. That's pretty much all I'm going to do with you. I will give you the full solution for it there, and you should be able to work your way through it. Key things to look out for here in terms of this is the assessment. Make sure that you do this right in setting up your package folders, etc. Make sure you follow this exactly. Don't make up your own stuff. Check it and double check it that you've got the right names, the right properties in there. You will need to know about inheritance, you'll need to know about super in terms of constructor, you'll need to know about constructors, and you'll need to know about overriding a method in terms of polymorphism, which is the display all. You will need to be able to probably do something in the lines of validation, similar, not exactly the same obviously than this, and you'll need to be able to create a class with a main method, be able to put this sort of stuff out the screen and use good principles in doing so. So that means good indentation, good white space, good code clarity. Good code clarity means also creating methods rather than sticking a huge amount of code just into the one area. And you'll need to be able to use if statements and potentially for loops and things in there, and obviously arrays. Okay, dokes. Hopefully of use to you. You'll see that the assessment has similar sort of things.